never just juxtaposed the speeches when I thought was everything was right with my default pre-setting beliefs in socialism. And it wasn't until I got to college that I actually went backwards. I was the opposite. I went backwards through college. I got there as a socialist and atheist, and I came out a Christian and a right-wing Republican. So I don't know what that is, my nature. So I've read all this stuff. Before I became a Christian, read lots of history, and became a libertarian in college. Eventually got an engineering degree. I know that sounds like it's different, but it's really not. Everything's the same. Everything we learn, everything we do is all related. It all helps inform the way you think about things. Proposed to my beautiful wife, and within 30 seconds of telling her parents I was asked to convert to Judaism, and at that moment in time I realized that I had no belief system. I didn't know what I was converting from. So I had this weird question of, well, who is Jesus then? And in the process of trying to answer that question, I found it. For about a year and a half, I was involved in an online debate forum, arguing against the most obnoxious people you could possibly imagine, saying the foulest, most disgusting things you could imagine. And I didn't believe in God. I wasn't a Christian at the time, but they were so obnoxious and atheistic. I was pissed at them. Took the side of arguing for God, and in the process it actually helped me believe it myself. I found Jesus in 2004. I confessed my faith to Mark Ressler over here in his office in April. In that time, 2010, I joined the Jesse Kelly campaign. I was a paid campaign staff for a little while. I got in lots of arguments. There's two cousins I no longer speak to because of political involvement. They are aggressive and disagree with me. My maternal uncle, the draft dodger guy, who I used to have a very good relationship with, even though we disagreed, I don't really talk to him much anymore. I still love him, I still talk to him, but the relationship's not the same. And in that process, I kind of figured some stuff out and came to a couple of realizations. The big one was in July 31st, 2014, I went to an emergency appendectomy, and I had a come to Jesus moment. I had a pretty severely swollen and gangrenous appendix, and they told me right before surgery, just me and my wife in the room, and they said, yeah, there's a chance we're going to have to remove part of your colon and your intestines to get the appendix out because it's so horrible and so awful. And my best friend had died from colon cancer, and I remember what happened when they resectioned his colon, and he was in the hospital for 3 months. And I had about 15 seconds to make my peace with God and tell my wife I love her. And then when I woke up, I was looking for a colostomy bag. I didn't know what was going to happen. So after that, I deleted several hundred friends off of Facebook. I deleted all my political posts. I deleted everything. I was so turned off by the whole thing. I felt like somebody ripped the scab off, and I had a complete turn off. And I've been for the last 2 years, 3 years. I don't even watch the news anymore. I don't pay attention. I get enough of it just by hearing people talk. It just completely disgusts me. So in that context, I'm coming back around where I have a different, I'm able to tolerate it a little bit, but it was a pretty severe experience. So I'm hoping that you don't have to have an emergency appendectomy to have some insight that I have, or maybe you can tell me my insight's bogus and you'll teach me something. So here's the discoveries in a nutshell. I was pretty insufferably arrogant and obnoxious most of my life in politics. I alienated family members. I liked to argue. And I'm very skilled at ridicule and verbally cutting people down, which is what politics is today. I'm going to answer to Jesus on Judgment Day for that. The people whose soul I cut up into ribbons and destroyed in my life that I don't even remember now, just from the stuff I said. I'm very convicted about that. Once I met Jesus, I actually realized that just because you can shut somebody up doesn't mean you won the argument. It just means you shut them up in your room. And I think that's an important lesson that hopefully all of us can learn before you actually hurt people. And certainly, hopefully you're not hurting people while you got a cross around your neck and claiming to be a Christian. So I'd like to share some of that, and I'd like to hopefully gain some enlightenment out of this, maybe some interaction afterwards. I like to build a fellowship in this church. That's the most important part, is to build our congregation, make sure we're a body of believers that actually follows Jesus. I'd like to protect our church, the invisible church and this one, from bad actions. I'd like to defend Christ and hopefully offer something worth your while to consider. So now, some rhetorical questions. You guys ready? You guys recognize these questions? Do you know for a fact that if you were to die tomorrow that you would go to heaven? Does anybody struggle with that one? Everybody solid? We're good? If you did die tomorrow, you're asked at the gates, why should we let you in? What would you tell them? Everybody know the answer to that one? It's not a trick question. It's the EE questions, right? Evangelism closing questions? Here's another one. This is not a question. I find that the answer to these questions get harder to answer in direct relation to how long it's been the last time I was on the knees. You guys ever been a few days where you're kind of wandering in the weeds and dealing with the world and the filth that's out there on television and everything else? It's kind of hard to answer that question after you've been doing that. It gives you a pause. You hesitate for a second. So how's your prayer life? Do you have an active one? Are you talking to God on a regular basis? Do you hear what He has to say for you? Are you quiet long enough and still enough to hear what He has to say for you? And those are rhetorical, because I want you to think about those throughout the context of everything else we're talking about here. So, let's go back to the first question. Why are you here? And this is a double entendre, is what it really is. Why are you really here? If God exists, the Bible is His Word, this is a logical ladder we're walking up here. Right? Then Jesus died for your sins, so you have eternal life. Therefore, there's only two kinds of people in this world. The entire world. Lost and saved. That's it. And there are only two legitimate relationships and interactions you can have with people on this planet at any time in your life. You're either rescuing the lost or you're encouraging the saved. That's it. Every context, whether you're going to the grocery store, when you're arguing with somebody about politics, or whether you're talking to your kids, you got to be doing one of those two things. Right? Or you're wasting your time. You're wasting God's gift of life and breath on this world. Because once you're saved, and that's truly what you believe, and that drives your decision, and it informs your decision making, everything else you do outside of that context is literally a waste of time. Closing this quote right here. So this is the more masculine side of Christianity, of wanting to charge up the hill. Jesus, give me a mission. I'm going to go get it. I want to go fight the battle. I want to go win the war. I want to go fight the Pilgrim of Progress. Mr. Valiant for truth. Going to go down to the water hole, and I give my sword to he who can wield it, but my scars I take to my Father in heaven, so I can show him the work I did for him. If you got the courage to go into the lion's den, this is what we're talking about here. But that's what we're talking about here. You can't take politics lightly. It's not a native environment for Christians. It's a worldly environment. So what does all that have to do with politics? Everything. How do you believe in the public sphere and the relationships you build or destroy have eternal consequences? That really obnoxious atheist that drives you insane because they're such a jerk and they say horrible things. Believe me, they say horrible things. Like stuff you can't print. Something you wouldn't say to your kids or your best friend. Is that really the conversation you want to engage in with those people? Do you know when to shut up and not to engage? As Christians, we know better, or at least we should. And we should behave like we know better. So here's some more rhetorical questions that makes me feel really uncomfortable based on my past. The last conversation you had about politics furthered the goal of rescuing a lost soul. Is that something you were thinking about when you were yelling at somebody or arguing why the your candidate was better than the other candidate? Did you help build up, restore, renew the faith and spiritual life of brother or sister in Christ? Is Jesus proud of the way you conducted yourself? And here's what I think is the crux of it all. Have you accepted the secular belief that religion belongs at church, is to be set aside, and then you go out in the world and you use the world's rules? Because I think most of us have, because that's the default setting of popular American society. Church, you keep over here in the church box, and then when you go about your daily life, you go about your daily life the way the world has instructed us how to do it by default, because we haven't put any thought into it. I would say that you put your faith in a box if you have, because the Bible will inform you how to behave in every circumstance in life. It'll be better for it. So I'm going to talk a little about anger, because I think anger is the primary motive of modern politics today. That's why I turned it off. Every single, Fox News came out and it was a breath of fresh air, because finally you actually heard another side of an argument instead of a constant meme with one side of the argument. But now it's just, let's put two people that argue up on stage. Yes it is, no it isn't. Yes it is, no it isn't. Raise voices, pointing fingers, wagging, you're just a liar. No, you're a liar. And it just goes on and on and on. 24/7, talk about nothing. Argue about the same stuff over and over again, yelling at each other, pointing fingers. And not one person there actually deciphering what truth is. Truth is not to be found in the news. Every word they use is designed to extract an emotional response from, they got the dog whistles out, right? They say the buzzwords to make somebody, some key target group, they do these marketing studies, and they use words, and they study what the words, and study what the reactions of people for the words are to elicit response. That's how the politicians work. That's how these guys work. And what they want is they want people to be angry. You know how hard it is to convince somebody that isn't this a really good thing, don't you want to do it? That's a really hard marketing sell. If you get somebody pissed off, they're going to march down and take action right away. That's the easy button. So that's what they're doing. You got pretty girls, puppy dogs, babies. Anger. They don't talk about anger, but that's the truth. Anger is a much easier, faster way of motivating someone to action. And I'm telling you as a Christian, you can't respond to that. You cannot respond out of anger to anything that's happening in politics. Because as soon as you do, you lose. Because how did Jesus do it? Did he get angry at the politicians and the worldly powers of the day? No. Only the religious hypocrites he got angry at. Pontius Pilate, he didn't get angry at Pontius. Matter of fact, he didn't say anything until Pilate questioned his authority. Pontius Pilate arrogantly said, well, I have the authority to let you free. And that was the only time Jesus finally spoke up. He says, no, you don't. Only one person has the authority here, and that's not you. He didn't get angry. He didn't get up and yell at Pontius Pilate. He didn't get yelled at any of those people. The only people he yelled at were Pharisees, who were projecting themselves as, hey, I'm representing God. That's something Jesus got mad at. Early in the Gospels, when he'd do a miracle and everybody tried to grab him and push him in front of the crowd and use him as an icon, and he'd disappear. He's not going to let anybody use him for a political tool. Speaks truth without malice or without anger. Sorry, I said a lot of words. But the point on this slide I want to get at is that the next logical argument is, well, what about righteous anger? Well, I'll turn the question back. What is righteous anger? Can you be righteously angry that your candidate didn't win? No. Can you be righteously angry that the United States might turn into a bowl of dust next year? No. There's none righteous, not one. None of us are righteous. And your pent-up beliefs and expectations are not righteous. Only God is righteous. So only when you're defending God's honor can you be righteously angry. Anything else is dust. And what I'm saying, the words that I'm saying, there's freedom in this. If you can let go of all this stuff, there's freedom to be peaceful and gentle and kind. Because once you let go of it, you realize they're going to hold on. And I don't know if this will work or not. This is kind of like a funny interlude, but can you double click? Is that video going to run? I'm back to the black screen of the video. Go backwards. No. Oh well. That's good. I'll just go without it. This is funny. It's from the Avengers movie. You know that scene where they're getting ready to fight the big alien thing? I don't know if you've ever seen it. And there's the Hulk. And Captain America says to Bruce Banner, "Hey, don't you need to get angry?" He's like, "That's the secret. I'm always angry." And he turns into the Hulk and he stops this giant alien creature from. That's the point. If you're getting angry at politics, it's not a momentary thing that you have. It's something you're carrying with you. You're angry at your core about something because you have an expectation that is misplaced. Anger is a state of being. It's not something that's emotions. What Hollywood tells you is that everything is a momentary emotion, right? Love is just what you feel at that moment, which is why their marriages never last. Anger is just something you react at that moment because someone else did it because you don't want to take responsibility for yourself. Christians were called to a higher purpose. We're called to a harder life. Anger is something that's within us. It's our own sin or it's our own expectations that we're getting frustrated that someone else didn't live up to our expectations, so then we get pissed off. That's not Christian. We're either let down, expectation of success didn't get met, so we're mad about that, or we get frightened, and then we react. All those things are a lack of faith. You don't have a faith in the one who made you. So let's go talk about faith and trust. You talked about trusting these politicians. Why? They're filth. They're human guys in powerful positions lured by the world, the flesh, and the devil, and temptations that nobody can resist. Does anybody trust in America? I mean, I'd love to. I love this country. Born patriot, been one my whole life. Constitution, it's a great document. It's the greatest form of government ever devised by man, but it was devised by men. The belief that people are basically good, is that a belief that any of you guys hold? You think that people are inherently good? Did you put your faith in Ben Carson or upset that he didn't make it? Ted Cruz? Any Bernie Sanders supporters in here? Anybody Donald Trump supporter? You don't have to raise your hand. And even if you are, don't you feel a little dirty? Hillary supporters? Probably not too many of them. Anybody got faith in Congress? I'll do the IQ test later if you do. SCOTUS, Supreme Court, anybody got faith in that? The UN, climate change, any of this stuff? These are all idols, folks. They're all an illusion that distract us and pull us away from the truth and the reality of this world, which goes back to why are we here? So you need to test yourself. If any one of those things, there's maybe not something on that list, but there's something in your mind, if you find yourself getting frustrated or angry or upset about something, you're holding on to something. You got an expectation that was misplaced. And so you have to think about it. What would make you angry? And if you find that thing, that's your idol. You need to kill it. You need to burn it up. And when you put your proper faith in Christ, suddenly you're going to find a peace. You know, let it all go. And none of it matters. So then you're not going to get mad when your wrong candidate wins, or he says something stupid, or the guy you put your faith and trust in turns out he's cheating on his wife, or whatever the soap opera response to the world that we have here. Anybody disagree with my description of what I see when I look at political discussion? Anybody gonna add a couple words to that? That's what I see when I watch the news. Anybody got some new ones you want to add to that? Is that pretty accurate?
Causes stress. It's stressful to stay nuts.
Yeah, sure it is.
I don't like all the constant, I can't imagine how anyone can constantly be upset every single day about a river company. I mean,
Yeah. How could you be a political pundit and
so
deal with that?
so then that tells me
That
like
toxic anger
Right.
every day of your life.
and so that tells me that I'm wondering if it's actually not true, that they're not truly
Maybe it's just a
stressed,
show.
that it's a show,
Mhm.
because no one can live that way.
Yes, sir, Ben.
Frustration.
Frustration. Yeah, that's definitely on that list. All right, let's contrast it with a couple other lists I found in this little known book. Galatians 5:16 through 25 contrast the deeds of the flesh versus the fruit of the Spirit. Which one of those does the current political environment represent more closely?
All of them on the left.
Yep. All of them on the left. That pretty much describes our news cycle right there, isn't it? You pretty much use one of those as the title to a news article in every day's newspaper. How are we supposed to behave? Well, all right. Politics is the enemy territory. The devil wants you to be there. He wants you to forget that you're a Christian. He wants you to not think about religion or Jesus or anything like that. He wants you to get angry, get engaged in politics, and yell at people. That's what he wants. He wants you to forget who you are and forget your inheritance and soil in the mud with a lot of really nasty people. Politics is the battleground for worldly power. There's people out there seeking fame and fortune, self-promotion, arrogance, self-righteousness, all that kind of stuff. None of that's Christian. There's no place for a Christian to be engaged in that kind of activity. Does anybody disagree with that? Unless you're doing one or two things, right? So what do you have to do to be able to do those things in that environment? And I was talking to a few people I know in various emergency response type fields, police, doctors, and there's a difference that comes. There's certain professions, and politics is definitely one of those, where the situation is so toxic, you're dealing with people at their worst all the time, and it has the ability to color who you are and what you do and your worldview and everything else. It has a way of really messing you up. But we all know a Christian somewhere that somehow is able to operate in that environment and be nothing but a voice of reason and peace and blessing in the horrible circumstances. And what they've done is they actually are on their knees and they actually have a relationship with Jesus. And they see the world through this eye, through this lens. Every single person out there is either their brother and sister in Christ, or there's someone desperately needs to hear the word of God. They might not know it. And so, as Paul, you need to see them as prisoners in chains, not as opponents, not as evil people or dirty or rotten. You need to see them as this. And what greater glory is there for God to take someone who is the most obnoxious, nasty, wicked person you know and have them meet Jesus face to face and become a Christian? Isn't that what God's plan? The Bible's full of those kind of stories, right? Who's one of the greatest evangelists? Paul. Paul was, you can't find anybody worse than Paul. He went around killing people. Yeah.
Do you mind if I offer up a good example that goes with this slide?
Sure.
I tend to think of one of the best examples of Christian political conversation is John 4, where Jesus speaks with a woman at the well. Because if you really think about her, she was the exact opposite of him.
Yep.
And I sometimes, when over the years I've struggled like you, right, with how do we behave ourselves, and I think about how Christ treated the situation where he could have gone on a rant.
Yep.
We probably would have done that, right? What are you doing here by yourself? What do you mean your people are the son of Jacob? What do you mean that this shrine up here is the real temple? It's all nonsense. And he could have gotten in this huge fight, and he took this attitude. And think about the ways he guided her through that conversation. He didn't choose to manipulate her, which he certainly could have done, and which the world would have done, manipulate her into believing like they believe and contributing to their campaign at the same time, right?
Right.
So it's a really good illustration,
Exactly
I think, of how we should behave.
No, that's exactly right.
I just to dovetail on that thought too, to that example, I think one thing we as people just forget to do too is that real relationship building and persuading others to Christ, it's not a big tent type of activity. It's about expressing care to that individual, saying, look, I'm going to sit with the woman at the well and actually talk with her and spend time with her. And I'm going to sit here and talk to my friend so-and-so. You can't, that's why things like, and you talked about this already, online forums, all these other media outlets, they're really kind of a waste of time, because at the end of the day, you can't really get into the arena of ideas and core values and core beliefs without knowing that individual and what they've done. It's like what you said to me before, somebody can't unreason themselves out of something that they've reasoned themselves into. Excuse me. And you can't engage in that activity until you actually get to be with them as individuals.
Yeah. You can't show somebody the light if they don't believe the light exists. You can't argue with them what the truth is if they don't believe in truth. And so you can't engage in an argument that they don't even believe in the fundamental basis of what the argument's about. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the frustrating thing about people wanting podiums. Like a lot of people want podiums, a place where they can like say what they want to say and be respected for their intellectual prowess or their theological intellect, and they always want to be listened to and respected, and they think that having a podium will give that to them. But that's not like that doesn't guarantee that there's a relationship between the people in the crowd. They can listen, they can walk away, but we have a relationship. That means that people are invested in a relationship. And when you have established a relationship, when you start talking to them, when you get to that level where they're willing to listen to what you have to say about God, then it's not like they can just, walk away because they have formed an investment in you, in a relationship. It's totally the way Jesus, related to people. And I think the church relies too much on podiums sometimes. People aren't willing to invite other people in the community into their house and into their life because they're too much within the church bell rock that we talked about before.
Amen. I think of another situation that came up while I was listening to you guys talk right now. It's sort of related to politics. Anybody heard of the Veritas Forum? It was started at Harvard University about 10, 15 years ago by Christians at Harvard campus, Harvard College. And they started a newspaper called Veritas, and then they started a forum that went around the university campuses. And about 10 years ago, I went to one of the Veritas forums. And they simply had a professor that was well known in nuclear physics who happened to be a Christian. And he gave a presentation about what he was working on, his study, his biography, and why he was a Christian, Christian testimony. And then they had this huge room in Harvard building. You guys know UVA campus back in the days. The lecture hall where you have 300 kids in it, right? It's a 300-person auditorium. And you had these professors standing up, accusing them and yelling at them afterwards. No. I looked around. I looked at the look on some of the students' faces. And the guy didn't argue any convincing argument. His testimony was okay, but it wasn't anything that you would think. He was no Jonathan Edwards, you know what I mean? He wasn't ringing the bell and people were coming up to the altar calling, But he just simply said who he was. But the fact that he existed as an eminently qualified intellectual that also was a Christian was a threat to the people in that room. He did more for the cause of Christ in that little presentation than almost anybody else does. And sometimes it has nothing to do with what you're saying. or what you're doing. It's simply being a calm, peaceful, pleasant person in an argument, in a conversation, stating the truth without threatening. Loving the person that you're with has a greater impact for the kingdom than anything else you can do. So I think there's power in Christians that are properly equipped going into the marketplace of ideas and politics. But you have to be properly equipped. You have to know what you're getting into, and you have to be prepared. And then if you're focusing on these things, you can also have an opinion. You know, you can promote truth and ideas, but you got to know when and when not to engage. And if you keep it in this context, you're going to be more effective for the kingdom, which is actually more important than politics anyway. So I kind of already said that. I think I already said all these things. So, but this is going to be getting more to this next week. Like, I got books you guys can read and all kinds of other thoughts of how to engage and what to do, what to prepare, how to prepare yourself, and what to expect if you decide to. If anyone wants to get on an online chat forum with some atheists and some people that don't agree politically, I'll give you some pointers on what you're going to see when you get there. You're not going to like it. So I'm back to the goals. So hopefully I gave you something to think about. Hopefully I've issued some challenges to you guys on how to think about it. Maybe there's a warning shot, maybe a word of encouragement to others. I hope you realize that politics is, you need to bring Jesus with you when you go. So, next time we'll be talking title for it. So, I'm open for conversation, discussion, questions, or good one. Yes, sir.
I got one more point too on the how do we engage slide. It's interesting to me, again back to John 4, that one of the things that Jesus did to prepare was he ditched the disciples. And it makes me think sometimes we rely too heavily upon our group, right? Our disciples, the people that may not have the right frame of mind, may not be caught up in prayer. And Jesus knew that his disciples were not ready to have that conversation with her. It was all times where they showed up and then they were puzzled by the fact that the conversation was over and that it had happened. And that was the most impact that he could have on them at that time.
Right.
And sometimes our disciples are much more of a distraction than a help when we are engaging with the world.
Right. And sometimes it doesn't help to bring your theme music.
Just one kind of final thought about anger and what you're talking about there. I think one thing that we as Christians in particular have got to be very mindful of about anger, and you went off on several subtopics of what that anger looks like in different ways. You did a good job of that. The thing about anger too is it's also incredibly profitable. And so when you're talking about getting your news, that's why they do it, right? Because if you really think about it in a vacuum, if we really wanted to get information, there'd be a way to do it with a fairly objective lens if we were to be really intellectually honest with ourselves without an agenda, to where we could relay information in a pretty healthy way. We're equipped as humans to do that. It's not real sexy is the problem. So when you're talking about news outlets, news media, blogs, other things, because we're humans and we're so screwed up, and we do want to get a reaction out of somebody to further what our human agenda is politically, it's not without anger to trigger those mechanisms to get people to continue to latch on to what it is that you're selling. Fox News is, like you said, it started out as the idea of it was great. What it's morphed into now is pretty revolting. And if you really look at what the objective is, you can say to yourself, you know what, that show, how it's produced, what's being purported out there, it's totally agenda driven, and there's money behind it. There's a bigger picture than just what you immediately see.
Yeah. I still think Fox is better than the other one. The other choices.
Well, it's like Donald Trump. He's better than our alternatives. But do we like him? No, but it is what it is. And you have to look at the media the same way, too.
You got it first.
I was just going to say that when I learned that the politicians, you can't trust them because they're playing their own game. And literally, you can't get angry because we have no control. the best way we can buffer ourselves or bolster ourselves is to learn the history of what the country was meant to be, to learn the Constitution and how it first came about. And
You actually have to know what you're talking about before you start
yes, right. So it's like when you watch Fox News or when you watch any news channel, it is the best reality show ever. It's a total soap opera because they're all, you don't know what's a lie and what's the truth. And it's funny to see the games that are being played, but it's real and it will affect us in the long run with the changes of laws and what's happening to our country and the development over time and how we're being transformed and how it will affect our future. And so the best thing to do when you approach politics is, like you said, just educating others and trying to keep that Christian base. And when people get mad, like what I have found on Facebook, when I see liberals who are very angry and they're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe someone at a Trump rally beat up this other guy. And then I said, well, if that guy wasn't a Trump supporter, why was he there? What was he saying to instigate the other person to beat him up? I mean, he must have been really prodding and being annoying, and then...
I think people should read news clips and history of the 1930s in Europe to understand what's going on with political rallies. If people intentionally going into rallies to rile people up to cause a scene, and it's not going to a good place.
So you have to keep an open mind with politics.
No, I don't think we have to keep an open mind.
Well, no.
I think we have to know our mind.
Right. Well, that too, and just, but you can't get angry. You just have to watch it, and you have to educate others.
If they're willing to listen.
Right.
I think we have to know our mind, but we have to most importantly know who God is and what He wants of us. And as long as I can keep working on making myself the best Christian He wants me to be, the rest will kind of take care of itself.
Right. That part.
Yeah, we're standing on a rock. They're swimming around. All we have to do is be who we are and speak truth when it's appropriate to speak and say nothing when it's not. Because there's nothing profitable engaging in some of the conversations that are going on there. There's nothing a Christian's going to say into that conversation in some cases that's going to be profitable or healthy, and it's not going to be good. Yeah.
So given that, so I'm just thinking, I mean, there's obviously there's so much going on politically right now, and I think you're talking about anger, but I think fear is also a tool that is often used in politics. Where is our country going? How is this going to?
They're kissing cousins.
Right. Yeah. How is this going to affect my children? How is it? And so I wonder, and this is I'm just throwing it out there because I don't know the right answer. How much should we be trying to shape the future by our political involvement, and how much should we be just stepping back and saying, I know who's got the future, I'm going to vote when it's my opportunity to vote, I'm going to make the decisions that I know are right for my family, and if they go against what the law is, then I guess I need to figure out exactly where God wants me to be standing on that one.
Is it fair to say that hope and fear are opposite ends of the same coin too, though? Because
Yeah.
what you fear losing the most is probably what you put your hope into. So my question would be is, where's your hope?
And then, that's a good question. But if my hope is in Christ, then what do I do? Do I just say, let
You have
him
nothing to
use?
fear in this world.
Right. So then do I just say, let anybody use whatever bathroom they want? I know what I'm doing with my kids, and I know what I'm doing with my family, and so why am I even engaging over here?
I think, if we had a great awakening right now, right? And we go down in every park, there's a big tent and people are dunking their heads and becoming Christians. I don't think people will tolerate the current news cycle. Wouldn't tolerate it. They wouldn't make any money, people turn it off, we get do something. It's just not acceptable behavior. It's childish. It's schoolyard taunts and rants. That's all it is. It's ridiculous. It's unbefitting a dignified human being, let alone an adult, and for sure not a Christian. It's just not acceptable behavior. So we shouldn't engage in it. You know, I watched a news clip a couple weeks ago, and I was doing research for this, and I thought about bringing more video stuff, and I just, you know, I don't want to bring that toxic junk in here. And I watched, and there was a supposedly moderate Muslim imam type guy who's American, and then they had a Christian pastor from Texas, and they started arguing about Islam was really good or bad. And it was like a schoolyard, you know, scuffle. And there is just a childish argument. I'm like, that guy's a pastor at the church. He's going to have to answer for his behavior. How could you, as a pastor, get lured into an argument like that on national television? I was cringing. I was cringing to see it. And I'm sure I would probably agree with almost everything he believed in. We'd have a great time at lunch. You know, he's probably a great guy. But oh my goodness, that's just not acceptable behavior.
And people see that too. Like, I think one of the things that made some people like Ben Carson was because he actually was intellectual and he did not engage in childish stuff. And one of the things that people are attracted to Bernie is that he's actually passionate and believes in what he believes in. He like actually truly believes in it.
Yeah, so
Even though I stand by and go, how can you believe that? He actually truly believes in it, and people can tell. And they look at the other options and they go, those are just pragmatists, they're just in it for power. And, you know what I mean? And so when people look at the way like people live their lives, when you look at the way Trump has lived his life and the childish stuff he throws around like he's an 11-year-old, people are turned off. Some people who value intellectual, calm, reasoned conversation, they're just totally repulsed by that. But then you have an entire generation or two of the U.S. who have not been taught to certain behaviors that some of us have been taught and how to value those behaviors.
Right,
and
but you're
they're
not gonna
attracted by the passion, even though they want to believe that these behaviors by these people are not just sales tactics. And you know, with someone who has so well sold things for so long, he knows how to sell it. They are attracted. They believe in it. They haven't been taught anything else.
Sure.
You know.
So Ben Carson gets in the race.
Right.
He takes the high ground. He's a good, righteous guy. I love Ben Carson. And he had nothing. He had no response to the childish.
I mean, I knew people.
He had no response.
Yeah.
And he lost because of the news cycle didn't support it. And he didn't have a
Well,
party.
it didn't sell.
What's that?
It didn't sell.
No, he had nobody in the media that was singing the same song. You know, the media is driven for the drama. They don't care about anything, and they love nothing better than to destroy people.
I just thought that was really interesting. It made me sad. I don't tend to get angry. I tend to get sad.
Yep.
I just was sort of sad. I didn't necessarily get attracted to any one person. I kept trying to figure out who was for real, you know?
Yeah. Well, same thing with Ted Cruz, though. Lying Ted, really?
Yeah.
Lying? Is
Yeah.
Trump a liar? I don't know. Not any more than anybody else. I mean, using the word liar you call me a liar, and that means we're going to be meet out in the back with pistols. You know? I mean, that's what it used to mean. I don't like hearing that word. It's not acceptable behavior. We shouldn't be. Nobody should be calling anybody a liar. It's not polite. It's not dignified. It's childish.
Well, we have a very serious situation with the Supreme Court.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
That it could be in the next 8 years, 4 new judges could be selected.
Sure.
And if we have a Bernie who's a socialist, or if we have another, or we have Hillary, we know where the Supreme Court's going to go.
Yep.
And we're going to lose our Christian rights to express our religion and our faith, our freedom of speech,
Very well put.
freedom of bearing arms. I mean, our whole Bill of Rights could be just taken away in an instant.
You're absolutely right.
Any of those people get it. That's why politics is so important.
Amen.
Because we want people who are going to be defending our faith, defending our Constitution.
Yes, we do.
We have to depend that our people are going to wake up and that Christians will find it necessary. I met a lovely couple, and I don't know, but some Christians that they believe, no, we aren't going to vote, we're not going to sign petitions. We know that God is going to take care of us.
Yeah.
And it will.
They're from the
that's
Oscar
fine.
sect.
Well, you
They're
know,
sticking their head in the sand.
Jesus came to redeem the sinners. But he had to go to the cross
Yep.
to do it.
Yep.
I mean, could God have just said, oh, okay, no more sinners? No. It had to be acted on.
Yep.
It had to be carried through. And that's why Christians at least can vote.
They should.
They should vote. They should be active and thinking about, we have to protect our faith.
Exactly. And that's the reason why I think the reason why they don't is because of this toxicity. I think the reason why they don't is because they can't reconcile the environment they're in, the abuse they take when they just open their mouth and say what they believe with their Christian faith. They don't know how to respond. They're not prepared. They don't have the information. They don't have the spiritual armor on. They're not ready for that environment. They don't realize how wicked it is. They've cloistered themselves in a Christian bubble, and when they step outside, they're shocked to find what they find. And they're disappointed and angry. Well, how could the world come to this? Because it's the world. That's where it's headed. It's always been that way. Yeah.
I believe that the church has failed. I speak from personal experience. I've been in the Reformed faith my whole life. And because we believe in election and that we were chosen, that many times the church has felt that God is going to do it, I don't need to, and that there hasn't been the outreach to the world. I just heard a program the other night on my phone that talked about how it was, I can't even remember the name of the group, somebody I hadn't heard of before, but it was a forum, and they were talking about how evangelicals sold out in the 80s, and I know back in the 1900s that was going on too, but that they took the shortcut to keep the votes and didn't take Christ with them. And basically it was what you said today, that you need to, and the church needs to. And I'm not saying all churches have failed, but having been in the Reformed faith my whole life, many of them have, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, because I think there's a lot less Christians than you think there are.
I agree with that.
And there's a lot of people out there that wear a cross around their neck, call themselves Christians, and represent themselves as evangelical Christians, and there's absolutely no evidence that Jesus is informing their decision making. It's been.
No matter who gets elected, God has placed whoever it is there for a reason. Whether it be to open our eyes to our failures and how weakened we are becoming, or to help restore our country and our beliefs and start giving us back our rights. He has placed them there for a reason. And no matter what reason it is, we should trust his decisions. And
Well, we have to be at peace with what happens. And absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, whoever is elected, whoever's placed, that's who it was meant to be. And we might be suffering the consequences of decisions that have been made over a long, long, long period of time.
I was going to speak of that. the Reformed guy, I was thinking about a quote by John Calvin about politics, and he said that other than the ministry of the Word, which is basically being a pastor and preaching the Word, the most sacred calling is being a civil magistrate, basically being an elected politician, whether it is mayor or a governor or a president. And I think that's an interesting, and, with all the mud and everything that's out there in politics, it is interesting that he thought that was, other than being a minister, it is the most sacred calling.
Like Moses, or?
Yes, or King David, or
Yeah.
Lincoln, or just basically being with the responsibility that's on you of being civil magistrate, or well, actually, it doesn't have to be an elected official. That was just my words. It could be the prince.
Anytime you're in authority,
Right.
and your decision making affects the lives of others, that's a pretty high calling, and you
by
need to be very aware of it.
By having authority, you reflect a part of God to the world, because God is the ultimate authority.
Yeah.
And of course, we know that what a slippery slope it is. So whoever is in that position and keeps his or her faith and principles is one of the most awesome things that you witness.
Do you think God looks at, you know how God looked at the Pharisees and saw them as like religious leaders, and then, I mean, maybe they had some civil leadership, but he found them to be hypocritical and hated that? Do you think God looks at politicians who claim to be Christians for the sake of getting votes in the same category?
That's worse. That's worse than the Bernie Sanders that doesn't make any pretension. God has much more sympathy for an atheist socialist than he does for someone who claims to be a Christian and behaves poorly in the market in the public eye. I
So you
can tell
think
you that.
he can't-
Everything that I've read in the Bible tells me that.
Do you think he would read false pastors and politicians who falsely claim to be Christians as the same disgusting?
Yep, they're Pharisees. Absolutely.
Because I always looked at them as just a sales job. They were just selling. I never looked at them as like as Pharisees. I looked at them as just selling.
Yeah, but see, that's the issue. That's why so many Christians don't participate in politics.
Okay.
That's what I believe. I mean, if I was a pastor, I would be terrified of stepping out and saying something into a microphone politically and embarrassing Jesus. And any politician that is jumping up to the microphone to say something, I'm afraid of what comes out of their mouth. And some of them are very good, and they speak first, second, and always about Jesus, and then they're good. And everything's in that context. Excuse me. And there are very good ones out there that can manage that. But man, when you see a bad one, you just shudder because they're gonna.
Well, the Trojan horse behind what you're talking about is the reason Christians and churches are equipped to really deal with the arena of politics and how do we engage that is because everyone's deathly afraid of losing their 501c3 status. So you start talking politics on a pulpit, you can get that revoked.
That's the cynical view. I'm talking about the real. I mean,
No, I understand.
You have a pastor that's truly.
I'm talking about the church as a whole, though. I think what's happened in the church culture, and it's a cultural problem, is a lot of churches have punted on helping their congregation engage in that activity because the cop-out is, well, we might lose our 501c3 status, so we're just going to talk about being nice people versus actually talking about being active agents for Christ in the political sphere and doing it appropriately.
We're turning off people that are not believers. They don't want to stir the water and maybe not have them come because they Christianity that's their different moral opinion.
I'm just saying that is a mechanism that the earthly church as a whole has used as a bridle
Sure.
And multiple denominations. I mean, it's a cultural problem there.
Well, I think the reason why a lot of Christians don't participate in politics is for good reasons. And a lot of what I'm talking about here. And I want to reiterate that I think politics is the most difficult thing you can possibly do as a Christian. It's not to be taken lightly. I think this is the most challenging. There is no perfect, checkbox. You can go, okay, I did all these things. I'm a good Christian. There's no checklist. This is spiritual warfare on the front lines right here. That's what politics is. It's nasty. Yes.
I think one of the surprising shocking things the long time concerted effort to rid the United States of Christians or faithful Christians. We have solid those people that are very concerned that doing comments to things mentioned in education said human character kids didn't learn how to read as well as how to write in schools. Things like that.
Woodrow Wilson.
That sort of thing.
The primary purpose of universities is to undo all the harm that's been done by these kids' parents.
So all of this has been building up as a concerted, educated effort plan to bring us down. We have some things in our minds. It's fun. We have other groups that do try to provide perhaps it's not as well coordinated as
Well, I think all that's true, but I think we need to have a longer view of that. This isn't just something in the last 50 years or 100 years. This is eternal. It's the eternal struggle. This has been going on since the serpent said, "You surely shall not die." That's all we're talking about here. This is the eternal spiritual battle that's been with us since the dawn of time. And it's everywhere in every man-made institution, and every religion. It's everywhere. The devil is busy.
I was just thinking, I've been kind of listening to what everyone's saying, and I think it really kind of falls into really what Ben said. Wise kid, man. But in reference to what was said earlier about the church failing, and some of this talk of, how politics is purposely, like you said, in a planned way, attempting to, push the Lord out of the world. I mean, that's, like you said from the very beginning, the serpent. And I think that we're wrong to say the church failed. I think people fail. But the invisible church is the body of Christ, and God will not fail. And I think that that's where you get back to Ben and you say, yes, we need to be speaking up as people. Yes, we individually as human beings have failed, will fail, for whatever reason, to engage the world as we should. But none of this is outside of, God's not like, oh, Satan came up with a better plan there, I guess I need to reevaluate. This has always been his planet. It has always been his purposes that will prevail. And so I think just like what Ben said, we need to, as much as we can, speak God's truth into the world and step up when we're asked to. But ultimately, God will put who is intended to be in office. And maybe it will be a David, and maybe it'll be a Pharaoh. But for whatever reason, God's people end up where God wants them to be. And so the invisible church does not fail because God does not fail.
And through history, too, there's always, it's just the repeat and the pattern of society going down the tubes, and then there's a revival. Across all time.
First king was Saul.
Yeah. So and that's because God orchestrates that, and it takes the down to pull everyone up and to have a revival. But
Well, I'll tell you, if you can exercise your idols and your expectations, and you realize that the world we live in is filth, and it's all going to be dust someday. And the only thing that really matters is the relationships you have with other people. And in that context, you do what you think is right for the political situation. You go out and you get signatures for a candidate you believe in, You go, just do it in the context of what is real, what's true, and eternally so, not that. And you can be afraid of what's going to happen for this country. With a small a, you can be saddened by it. You can be, boy, that's probably going to happen, but you have to be at peace with it because we don't have control over that. All you can do is what you can do, and God's got a plan. It's not our plan. We don't understand it, and we're not called to conquer the world. We're called to suffer for Christ, and we're called to be obedient and bring others to the kingdom and to call out His word. And to the extent that we do that, I think He's going to bless our nation. And to the extent we don't, I understand it's getting better. It's just going to go away. I mean, this country could completely turn into dust, but Jesus is still here. We need to be holding on to Him. And once you have that, you have peace. You have that peace that surpasses all understanding. You have, okay, I'm not going to get worked up about that. Yes, it's bad. Yes, I'm going to be saddened by it. But you're going to be saddened by it like Jesus standing on the hill overlooking Jerusalem, and you're going to weep for what you see. Because it's a tragedy. It's a beautiful country. It's a wonderful country. It's the most powerful nation on earth for all the right reasons. And it's going down in the tubes. But behaving badly and embarrassing Jesus in the marketplace is not the way to fix it. And so we can't forget who we are when we engage. But we do need to engage. And if we can do so in the right way, you might encourage other Christians that are reticent to come to the table and actually get more involved. And if we had more Christians that are actual Christians in the marketplace of ideas, not tolerating bad behavior, not tolerating the kind of discourse that happens, that's how it changes. It changes God's way, God's plan, following Jesus' example, not taking cues from the secular world and behaving that way. It doesn't work. And all these little strategies to try to gain power politically, they're worthless without Jesus. They're worthless without God. You can't forget who you are. So, anyway, that's all I have to say for the day.
Almost done.
I wish. I don't know.
We have a little different perspective of this church has been historically very involved politically, and in some of those expressions have been really good, and some of it's been very good. And I want to throw out a word of caution to some of the people, and a word of encouragement to others. I think that's kind of both. So today I'm going to kind of hopefully get everybody's attention with what the reality is in the marketplace like this, what politics really is, in the context of a Christian faith. And then next week, I'm going to talk about how we engage that Christian faith in the process. It's nice to have that contrast. That's all. Right. I have no control. There we go. So that was a great quote. Hugh Hewitt wrote a book. I think it was during the campaign with Romney versus Obama, the second Obama election campaign, called Good and Faithful Servant. And it was designed, hopefully, to encourage Christians to get more involved in politics. Because if you look at statistics, Christians that believe in the Bible, believe in God, have a saving faith in Jesus Christ, don't vote. Not as often as they should. And if they just increase the number of Christians that voted, boy, we would transform this country in a heartbeat. You guys have probably all heard that multiple times. And I think I know the answer why that doesn't happen. And that you have Bible-believing Christians that have a true walk with Christ. You can't watch the news. You you can't engage in political discussion, and you can't do any of those things and maintain the fruit of the Spirit. You can't do it. It's a toxic environment. But here we have this call. This is, we have to. I mean, look at that. For Christians who vote, aware that all over the world there are hundreds of millions of their fellow believers who will never be allowed to do so. There's hundreds of millions of Christians in this world that do not have the privileges we have. They couldn't vote if they wanted to. And here we have millions of Christians across the country that can vote and don't. So, in that context, I'm going to have most of the rest of the day to do one thing.
Thanks.
So this is kind of catchy little cutesy words that we'll talk about. First one's true confessions. I'll tell you kind of my background, where I came from, why I might have something to say about the topic. I'm going to start with some starter questions and ask you guys a couple things, and then I'm going to ask a lot of rhetorical questions that are probably embarrassing if I put you on the spot, so I won't do that with rhetorical, but I'm going to hopefully thought-provoking questions. And then hopefully convince you guys that politics is serious business, and it is the devil's playground. It's not our native environment. And if you're going to engage in it, watch it, involve it, fill your mind with that filthy stuff. You need to be prepared for it, and you need to defend yourself ahead of time. So, why are you here today? Anybody? I threw out a couple ideas. Oh, this is my clicker? Okay. Okay. So anybody? This is part of the fit. This is not.
I'm looking for it.
They might have it down at the other room.
What?
They might have it down at the other room.
If nothing else, I'm just looking for it.
Oh, okay.
Is anybody in here politically active in any way, other than just voting? Okay. What's the nature of your political activity? Anyone? Involved in any kind of campaign? Have you guys done call-ins, call-in to radio shows? Have you guys written editorials? Anybody? Donations? Yeah?
I've been involved with Al Melvin, who's been running for office. He was our 3-term senator.
Yep.
And he's now running for corporation commissioner.
Right.
And yesterday I was out at the gun show getting signatures, because he needs 6,500 signatures to get on the ballot. And then he needs the elections money, which he get if he collects, I don't know how many hundreds of $5 donations.
Right.
You'd think that we were asking for $5,000. People are not, happy about parting with $5. But you just have to keep at it, because he's not a wealthy person to begin with. And if they were going to campaign with any effect, he needs this money. So he needs a lot of help. More signatures he needs, and $5.
Anybody here? That's awesome. God bless you. Is anybody else here interested in becoming active but don't know how, or thinking about it, or try it, didn't like it?
Define active.
What I mean is like in the public sphere, where you're actively engaging in a conversation with other people that may or may not agree with you, whether it's calling into a radio show, or writing editorials in the paper, or joining a political campaign as a volunteer, or as a paid campaign staff, or anything like that, or even running for office.
I think being politically active it is a very individual and unique experience, because what political activity looks like for a person like myself is very different than you or someone who.
Sure.
So, for example, I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. So, I'm a local business owner, right? In the interest of preserving my business and keeping it, there are times when you want to align yourself with certain organizations and certain things that are out there. There are other times where you actually, it even sounds coward, but you do want to stay apolitical on some things. And depending on the nature of the business that you're in, you may actually be required to stay apolitical at the expense of possibly having your business taken away from you. So, so political activity is a very fluid, I think one thing that I struggle with is proper digestion of information and how to synthesize that. And I just think in this culture, especially with things like Facebook, Instagram, and social media being what it has honestly created a vehicle by which people can take snippets of information that are not properly filtered, by the way. They can take snippets of information that have not been filtered or proofed, apply it to something that they want to do, and actually use it for their own agenda. It's so, and I really think as Christians we've got to come to this thing with thought, prayer, and really being truth seekers.
Yep, that's going to be excellent stuff. But that's absolutely right. Yes.
Okay, so I'm politically active for my profession, which I have to be, so that we can gain strides and move ahead, and it is for the health of America and so on. And I went to Washington D.C. last year and I'm going again this year to lobby. But I have been horrified in meeting political candidates, people who I trusted and I thought had equal ideas as I have, when they responded with the fact that it's like a chess game. It's all a game, and worrying about garnering enough votes for the next election when they were just elected, worrying about that ahead. Yes, which is, and like, I'm hearing that once they get elected and they get introduced at the House, being pulled into a room behind closed doors and being told, this is the way it is, you have to play the game correctly. And the best way is just to make sure that people who you trust get into office so that they cannot be swayed like that.
Is anybody here worried about the future? What Christians can or should be about it? Anybody? Is there anyone that's not worried about that? Has anybody been angry or disappointed at where the country's going in recent developments anytime in the last 10 years? Anybody? Anyone? Yeah. Has anyone not been angry or disappointed in the last 10 years? Is there any other reasons I haven't at least hinted at or touched on here? Are you talking? Okay. Some of those might be a trick question for you. I just want you guys to think about what is it about your state of mind that has your interest in politics. I want you to be aware of that. Next slide. Okay, so my goals today are hopefully to give you something to think about in the intersection of politics and faith. I want to challenge you to take it seriously in perhaps a way that you haven't before. Hopefully you have, but perhaps not. I'm going to send a warning shot to some and a word of encouragement to others. And then the most important part of all of that is I think we need to find Jesus in this process. Politics is not divorced from our faith. It has to be part of it. Whatever we do, we engage. We can't lose our Christian faith in the process. We can't forget who we are when we engage. Okay, next slide. So, I'm going to talk about me for 2 slides, and I'll make it quick because I don't want to talk about myself. I want to talk about what I'm talking about. So I call it truth confession. My dad was a war hero, Vietnam, highly decorated. My mom, she's a wonderful, loving woman, and she's just, I have no idea how they got together. My maternal uncle was literally a socialist, communist war protester in Vietnam while my dad was getting shot at over the rice banks. So I've had this, where do I put pictures? Just there, space right there. And so I literally had this Jekyll and Hyde reality my whole life. My uncle literally dodged a draft. I jumped on him with the Honduras in the summer between college, so it was while my father was still there. So parents got divorced. I went with my mom and came here. So my grandparents retired here in Great Valley. I was raised in TUSD, and the default, if you don't actually put any active thought into it, if you go to public school, if you'll come out either an atheist or at least an agnostic, then you'll probably be a socialist. You have a Marxist understanding of finances and economics, and without any thought, that is what our country is producing right now in our youth. So if you haven't challenged them to think about anything else, that is the reality of 90% of the people out there in this world. They have a Marxist understanding of economics, they don't believe in God, or if they do, it's kind of a yeah, I believe in it, but when it comes down to reality, their actions don't tell. That's what it was. But I was always fascinated with politics. I was fascinated since I was 16 years old. And having that weird political or family situation, my two political heroes were Martin Luther King and Ronald Reagan. Even as I was actually a socialist. Because I loved what Ronald Reagan said in his speeches. I could never just juxtapose the speeches where I thought was everything was right with my default pre-setting beliefs of socialism. And it wasn't until I got to college that I actually went backwards. I was opposite. I went backwards to college. I got there as a socialist and atheist, and I came out a Christian in the right wing of politics. So I don't know what. So I've read a lot of stuff. I read Marx, Nietzsche, Eastern philosophers, all kinds of stuff before I became a Christian. Read lots of history, Ayn Rand, became a libertarian in college. Eventually got an engineering degree. I know that sounds like it's different, but it's really